Thanks everyone for taking the time and joining us for this session. So today's session, I'll be talking to you all about Mitacs. Some of you might have heard about Mitacs before. Some of you might not have heard about Mitacs before. Maybe some of your organizations might have used Mitacs in the distant past, and you're trying to refresh your memory. So you're all in the right place. You're welcome. Thanks again for joining. So in the interest of time, I'll jump right in. So in the session today, like I said, I will be talking about what is Mitacs, what we do, and how Mitacs can support you and your organization in maybe solving some of the challenges that you might be facing, and how you can better engage with Dalhousie's co-op students, especially through Mitacs lens. Right. So Mitacs is a national not-for-profit organization. So what that means is that we operate from the Atlantic to the Pacific coast, and we work with almost all of the post-secondary institutions across Canada. And we are funded by federal and provincial governments together. And our mandate is to ultimately sort of contribute towards building a strong and resilient Canadian economy. And and how we do that is by sort of supporting and strengthening the innovation ecosystem in Canada. And the method or the approach that we use is by operating at the interface between industry and academia. And what I mean by that is that Mitacs enables partnerships or enables or facilitates building collaborations between industry and academia, so that the talents that exist in the academic institutions can be deployed in different Canadian businesses, like organizations like yours. So you can build innovation capacity, be more innovative, and ultimately that contributes towards strengthening Canada's productivity. And then globally, Canada can be more competitive. I know in the first the slide itself, we spoke a lot about, or I used the term innovation quite a bit. So what does that mean, right? Like, what does innovation mean? Innovation is basically when you're able to turn an idea into an actually tangible outcome is innovation. And what you need for a successful innovation, you need the right talent, the right skill set, which is what we will be talking about a lot today. And you need your network or partnerships that can help you in turning your idea into an executable outcome. And then you also need financial support to be able to take those ideas and execute them. So that's where Mitacs comes into the picture. So as Canada's leading innovation organization, Mitacs helps you with all three of these. Right? So we provide financial support. We enable you to build your network by facilitating partnerships or collaborations so that you can tap into the talents or the skill talents that exist in these secondary ecosystem. So we spoke about what innovation means and, how you can, or what you need for successful innovation. So then what is the outcome of it? Why do you need to be innovative as an organization? And how does Mitacs come into the picture in terms of helping you be more innovative, or how has Mitacs shown that it can be supportive of organizations in being more innovative? So a Statistics Canada study actually showed that Mitacs-supported enterprises or organizations saw a 9% increase in revenue, 16% increase in sales, and a boost of 11% in their productivity over a 3-year period of time, compared to if you saw the productivity average productivity of a company over a year's period, it's 0.8%. Right, so that shows you how Mitacs can help you accelerate, or how Mitacs support can help you accelerate the journey in your in you converting your ideas into actual outcomes. To further drive this point, also companies that were supported through Mitacs funding or Mitacs programs saw an average increase of about 18% in their workforce over a 7-year period of time, as opposed to a negative trend, as in a decrease in workforce for companies that didn't or were not supported through Mitacs funding in the same period. So this is not just from the perspective of the companies being more innovative. One of the recent or more common things that I hear more often when I talk to companies or businesses in Canada is that not finding the right talent, not being able to find a good candidate that that they want to retain, and it is becoming challenging to retain even if they find the right candidate. Right, so it is sort of a pretty common knowledge that several of these highly skilled, talented students leave Canada for better opportunities because they find better opportunities either in terms of the match in terms of skill set and or in terms of the compensation or remuneration. They leave Canada. So with these kinds of partnerships that Mitacs can support you build between industry and academia, it creates better pathways for these students so that we can give them better opportunities so that we can retain them in Canada, right? So that is the intent. And it's not just beneficial for you as a company, it's also beneficial, like if you look at the other end, it's also beneficial for the students as well. So we see that students that have participated or are funded through Mitacs internships, approximately 30% of them end up being hired by the company itself, which is a great number, but it's not a mandatory requirement, right? Like once you engage with the student through Mitacs, it's not a requirement, but if it turns out to be the right fit, the right skill set, you already have a good fit, and the student also have experience working with you. They know if that's the right fit for you, so you can end up hiring the student as well. Even in the scenario that the companies, the partners don't hire the students have now gained actual experience, so they become more employable, and they end up in relatively higher paying jobs with other companies, and they continue to contribute towards building R&D capacity in Canada, towards the innovation ecosystem in Canada, right? So it is also that sometimes when students work with smaller startup companies, they get more exposure to how actually the startup works. Sometimes they go on to even start their own commercial venture with an idea that they have. So it's also a win-win for the students and also for the partner organization that's engaging in the project. So hopefully by now I've convinced you that innovation is really key for, not just you as an organization, but for Canada as a country. And hopefully I've again convinced you that Mitacs can be your go-to partner in realizing your innovation journey or starting your innovation journey wherever you are at, right? So let's talk about how this actually works, right? So let's say that you have a project in mind that you think is a really good fit for a co-op student, and you want to engage with the co-op student, and you think that you might want to engage with a co-op student through Mitacs programs, right? So that's, let's see how that works. So Mitacs, actually, you can think of it like a triangle, right? So you need three key components to come together to make it work. One end or one aspect is your organization, that is a Canadian enterprise. We call it partner organization. I'll talk about the eligibility in the next slide, but you as an organization have a project in mind. Maybe it's a research project, maybe it's an innovation project or a challenge that you're facing and you want to engage with the student. The second component is the co-op student itself, the student that's going to be actually doing the project or doing the work with you. And the third component is an academic supervisor. So this might be the difference when you are engaging through Mitacs as opposed to engaging outside Mitacs. So if you are engaging through Mitacs, it always comes with the requirement of an academic supervisor. So this is typically a faculty member at the university. So the intent is that when the student is maybe if they have challenges or have some technical difficulties, they might want to tap into some of the academic expertise so they can go to somebody, some level of mentorship that they have through their academic supervisor. So how hands-on or hands-off you want the academic supervisor to be is a bit flexible. There are certain requirements or eligibility from the Mitacs perspective, which is that there must be some level of supervision or mentorship that the student receives. But if you want the supervisor to be very hands-on, but maybe they are unable to because of the bandwidth, maybe some of these aspects can be supported by the co-op office at Dalhousie as well. But typically, you need all three components to come together to make a Mitacs project work. So before I talk about the funding, I briefly wanted to touch upon the eligibility for the industry partner. It's a broader spectrum, so we call it a partner organization. So this could be a for-profit organization. So this would be most Canadian businesses. So what the requirement is that it should be an incorporated entity. It could be a startup. It could be a small to medium-sized enterprise. It could be a larger corporation. There's no restriction. There's no requirement or limitation in terms of how long you must have been existed as a business before you can tap into Mitacs. There's no such restriction. You can incorporate, last week, this week you're ready to tap into Mitacs programs. All good. Not-for-profit organizations are also eligible. So when I say not-for-profit organization, the requirement again is that they must be incorporated. So if you, and we do have a bit of a vetting requirement for not-for-profit organizations. So if you were, if you know of a not-for-profit organization that would be interested or would benefit from Mitacs funding, feel free to, connect them with me so we can explore the eligibility to ensure that they are eligible before they can start working on a Mitacs application. And then hospitals and municipalities are also eligible as partner organizations. So one of these entities can act as the industry partner in a Mitacs project. So now we'll talk about the funding model itself, right? So Mitacs works in what we call a block or a unit, right? So a block is a 4-month period or a 6-month period, but the most standard option is the 4-month option. So which means that 4 months equals 1 block or 1 block equals 4 months. So there are a couple of funding model options for each block. I'll talk about the one that's most relevant, which is the two that we have here, the standard models, which is $10,000 for 1 block, which requires the industry partner's contribution to be $5,000 plus HST, because we're still considered a service, because we're still a separate not-for-profit, not a direct arm of the government. So there will be an HST in addition to your actual contribution to the project. So your contribution will be $5,000 and Mitacs will contribute another $5,000 to make it $10,000. Of this $10,000, the entire funding goes to paying the student's salary. The other option is the $15,000 per block model, where the company's contribution is $7,500 plus HST, and Mitacs' contribution will be another $7,500 to make it $15,000. Of this $15,000, at least $10,000 goes to paying the student salary, and up to $5,000 can be used for project-related expenses. So this could be, for instance, if the student needs to travel between different locations, maybe they need to collect samples. If the project is maybe a lab-based experiment, then they might need to purchase some chemicals or reagents, or maybe they need to subscribe to a software for the project duration. So all of these expenses can be incurred within that $5,000, but this is not a mandatory requirement, right? So the entire $15,000 can also be assigned to the student's salary as well if you don't anticipate any project-related expenses. Or it could be anything in between as well. Say, for instance, that you only anticipate approximately like $2,000 in project-related expenses. The student salary component can be $13,000, and then $2,000 can be set aside for project expenses. And in the case that the project expenses don't ended up using, then you can just add that as a top up to the student salary as well. Like I said, I won't touch upon the $20,000 because that's meant for postdoctoral fellows. And if you are interested, for sure, reach out and we can chat later on that. So this, it also, Mitacs allows you to build a flexible or a scalable model where the minimum requirement is the project is at least 1 block, which is 4 months. But you can stack these blocks to make a project of desired length as well. Say, for instance, that you want to engage with a graduate level co-op student whose co-op requirement might be 8 months, which is 2 terms instead of 4 months. In this case, you can stack basically 2 blocks of 4 months each to make an 8-month project. Maybe let's say you have a larger project in mind and you want to engage 2 different graduate level students on 8-month internships. Then you can basically stack 2 blocks for each student. So your total project is going to be 4 blocks, which is 2 blocks for each student, right? So and each block has this $15,000 funding. So your total project for the 4 blocks is going to be $60,000, where each block is $15,000 in value. And you can have, in terms of eligibility, you can work with anyone from anywhere from an undergraduate student, master's, PhD, to postdoc. Recent graduates are also eligible. So let's say, even you engaged with a co-op student, but you want to, it's a really good student and you want to continue working with them once they graduate, you can still work with them through Mitacs funding as well. The only sort of limitation is that, well, you don't have a limitation on the number of blocks or units you can apply within an application. Like I said, you can have multiple blocks, multiple students with multiple blocks. All of that is fine. But when it comes to recent grads, because the intention for Mitacs is that it should act as a transition for these graduate students to find opportunities, it is capped at 1 year, which is they cannot be funded on a Mitacs project for no longer than 1 year max, which is basically 3 blocks, which is 4 months each, gives you that 1 year period. But the same doesn't exist for current students. So if it's a current graduate or an undergraduate student, we don't have limitations on how many blocks they can hold. It's only for the recent grads that there are limitations on the number of blocks. And in terms of the eligibility, if you're interested in recent grads, they should be within 2 years from the date of graduation at the time of starting the project, not at the time of application, but at the time that they start the project. So it's better to give a buffer. So if you are looking at somebody who's already closer to 2 years and you're just starting to engage or build a project, maybe, that's a little bit too close. Maybe a year and a half or year would be really great, or right after graduation is the best outcome, is the most ideal scenario. I'll talk a little bit about the flow of funds because that might also be slightly different from when you engage with co-op students outside the Mitacs sort of funding. So I was going to talk about the flow of funds where, this would be slightly different from, how you would have engaged with a co-op student outside a Mitacs engagement, because through Mitacs, probably, one of with today's question is that the funding always comes through the university, right? So the flow of funding is going to look something like this, where Mitacs will invoice the industry partner for your contribution. We'll send your contribution to Mitacs. Mitacs will add the co-funded portion of Mitacs's contribution, send it to the university, where the academic supervisor will be the one to administer the funding to the student. So, the one thing that I do want to add is, especially if you're considering stacking other funding sources or other wage subsidy programs with Mitacs funding, you want to be a little bit more cautious, because sometimes some funding organizations or some wage subsidy programs might require the student to be on your payroll, as opposed to this Mitacs engagement, where the student will be on the university payroll. They will be paid through the university. This might be beneficial, especially if you are a smaller company, or if they don't have a lot of resources in taking on administrative tasks. At least this can benefit you in terms of you don't have to worry about the payroll, or you don't have to worry about the administrative tasks on your end, because they are paid through the university, and that will be taken care of by the university. So I'll talk about the actual programs that we have. We might access different programs, but in terms of like the most relevant, and in the interest of time as well, I'll talk about the 2 programs that you can potentially use to engage with co-op students. One is the Accelerate program, and the other is the Business Strategy Internship program. The Accelerate is a program that supports Just give me 1 second. It's taking a bit of time to change slides. Okay. The Accelerate program basically is one that focuses on research-based projects, right? So basically, when you have a project that has a research component to it, right? Like it's an applied research component, you can consider Mitacs Accelerate as the program that you should apply to. Basically, you're generating new knowledge either for your company or generally for the broader field of study that the project is in or the student is working on. So it is, open to all sectors and discipline. There's no limitation. The project can be in any of the fields of study. There's no restriction or limitation, or there's no preferential treatment for one versus the other. There's no such thing. So the project can be anything from natural sciences to social innovation. All of them are eligible. And the funding model is the same. It will be co-funded both by the industry partner and by Mitacs together. The application is open anytime. You can apply any time of the year. But typically there is an application process, which I'll talk about in the next slide. And the review timeline is about 6 to 8 weeks. The success rate is quite high. We see about 95% success rate in the applications. Now, to dive a little deeper into the timeline, this is really important because when you engage with co-op students, sometimes the co-ops do have a certain timeline that the project should start in, which is where it's really, while Mitacs doesn't have a deadline, the strongest recommendation that I can give today is that work backwards from when you want the project to start. Typically, the great idea is to give yourself 2 to 3 months time in terms of the application process, having everything in place before the project starts, which is apply 2 to 3 months ahead of when you want to start the project or when the co-op term starts. Right. So once you decide that Mitacs is the right sort of tool for you to use in engaging with a co-op student, then you can sort of reach out to me. We can initiate the application process. There is an actual application process which you will complete along with the student and the supervisor as well, and everybody signs off on the application, which includes the industry partner, the student, the academic supervisor, also the university. All entities will sign off on the application, and it is submitted to Mitacs. And there is a review process. This is what takes approximately 6 to 8 weeks. And once the project is reviewed, and if it's approved, then a decision is provided. A project approval decision is provided to you, and then you can start the project. And usually for however many units you've applied for in the project, once that is complete, Mitacs will send a final exit survey. There's no additional sort of technical reporting requirement to Mitacs, so there's no other sort of any paper document or anything that you need to submit to Mitacs. Just a final exit survey, and it will be sent via email to all of the participants to your respective emails. Parallelly, when you submit the application, Mitacs will actually invoice the industry partner right away, like within the next week or so, even though the project is not officially approved, it's under review. This is because we do see because of a very high success rate. And then sometimes some projects, they want to start right away as soon as the project is approved, right? So in that case, to avoid post-approval delays, we do invoice ahead of time. So if you are in a scenario where you want the project to start as soon as possible, then the suggestion or the recommendation would be that try and pay the invoice even while the project is under review. But if you do have time, you can hold off until the project is approved and then send the contribution to Mitacs. And then, there will be usually a few days between when you send the funds and how, when it is reflected at Mitacs. And then we will send an official notice of award and the funding to the academic institution. If you are concerned that, let's say, you're not sure how would I pay the invoice, and what if the project is rejected, or if I want to cancel the project, in all those scenarios, the funding will be returned back to you, so you don't have to worry about that. Moving on to the next program, the Business Strategy Internship. This might be the most relevant program for engaging with co-op students, because this program focuses on innovation projects. I know it's like a very ambiguous term. What does an innovation project mean? Right. So it's a bit, for lack of a better term, I'm going to say this is not a research project. Right. So it is, you're not trying to generate new knowledge, but you're bringing on a student to use their existing training or skill set to an existing problem that you might have, or a challenge that you might have, or a project that you might have that would help your organization be more innovative, right? So that's the scope. This again, similar to Accelerate, there's no restriction on what sector, what discipline that the project might be in. It's open to everything, from science to engineering to social innovation. All of those works. The funding model, again, the same, and the same as the co-funding ratio, like we spoke before. And this is also open any time of the year. The review timeline for this is about 4 to 6 weeks. I mean, 4-ish weeks if I want to be optimistic. And then the success rate for this also is higher. This again, the application process is going to look very similar to Accelerate, where once you decide, you reach out, there is an application process, you complete the proposal, everybody signs off, it's submitted, and the review takes about 4-ish weeks. And once the project is approved, we have the funding in place, then you can start the project, complete the project, and once it's done, then you'll have the final sort of exit survey, and that's about it. There's no additional paperwork or document that's required. So I think that's all I have for today. Thank you so much again for all of you that have joined for the session. And of course, I want to thank all the funding partners for Mitacs, which is the federal government and also the different provincial governments that enable us to keep doing the work that we do to support, the Canadian enterprises and businesses in engaging with the post-secondary institutions in Canada.